Hello and welcome to Mythical Meeples. Today I'll be reviewing Tome of Beasts series by Kobold Press. So these are 3 books for D&D 5e containing a whole host of monsters. First up, I just want to say these books are amazing. They've got incredible artwork, as you can see from the front here, a whole variety of monsters which expand on those within the original D&D game, and also just new monsters completely that add to the setting. I had originally intended to do these books as separate reviews. However, as I feel they're quite similar in sort of context and use, I thought it'd be better to do one review that encompasses all 3, and then later on I'll be doing reviews for different monsters separately. So in this review, I want to cover the 3 things I love, 3 things I hate, and then 3 sort of standout creatures for me, which, with over 1,000 to choose from, is quite tricky, but I've kind of narrowed it down into smaller groups. These aren't the only books by Kobold Press. There are a whole range of them. There's deep magic, so extra spells, magic items. You've got Creature Codex here, which has more monsters. You've got the Tome of Heroes on the right there, which has different player options as well. I do intend to review these books in the future. And I hope you enjoy today's review. So I'm going to start with the 3 things I love from these books. So these books are amazing. They're incredibly simple in their design, but very well executed. Each creature has its own stat block, its own lore, and it's very, very hard to choose what I like most about these books, because I just love them as a whole, love the concept and everything. I have managed to pick out 3 things, however. So one of the things I really like about these is the layout of the books. I think the books are really well laid out. Monsters are easy to find. For the most part, monsters are placed together collectively. And by this I mean like all the dragons are together, all the demons are together, angels are all in one place, and so on. For me, at least, this makes it much easier to find creatures of a specific type. If you want your players to fight a demon, for instance, you just go to the demon section and choose one of your liking, instead of flip-wheeling backwards and forwards through the book trying to find the demons that you want. I just feel like this makes the game more immersive for people. You're not bogged down looking through books the whole time, and I just think it makes it much easier as a DM to find what you're looking for. So the second thing I really love about these books, which unfortunately isn't present in the first one, is the appendices. So the Tome of Beasts offers an appendix of the monsters, so it's just got all of the monsters alphabetically, laid out in different ways. So not alphabetically, sorry. So it's by challenge rating. You've got creatures by terrain and creatures by type. So if you're looking for something, say, desert terrain, you just go to the desert section of creatures by terrain. If you need a CR12 monster, you just go to the CR12 section of the creatures by type, by challenge rating, sorry. And if you want a dragon, you just go to the creatures by type, go to dragon, find what you're looking for. I think this is a really good way of doing it. It makes it much, much easier to find what you're looking for. So I guess this does kind of tie into what I was saying about the layout of the books. So the final thing I want to mention as my third thing that I love is just the sheer variety of monsters you can find in these books. Monsters, NPCs, you've got everything from sort of dragons, drakes, devils, mimics, so all the sort of traditional D&D monsters, but you've also got new ones that are just completely different from those in the D&D books. So for instance, there's Fey Lords and Ladies, so archfays that you can fight. You've got Necrotech, which is sort of giant undead constructed from the bones of many humanoids. I'll try and find it. So here you've got the Necrotech Thunderer, which is kind of like an undead elephant which has been built up and had a big ballista thrown on the top of it. You've also got creatures like Despair and Anger, which is essentially 2 fallen angels forced into one body. So you've got a lot of different concepts here that you might not be able to think of by yourself, or you might not find in other D&D books. written by different people. So obviously these were the 3 things I love the most. And now I'm going to talk about the 3 things I hate. When I say hate, it's more just me being nitpicky. I found it really hard to find stuff that I didn't like about these books, because they're just so well laid out, they're so varied, they're just really good books in general. So the first thing that I'm going to say is, I guess, referencing as something I don't like. For the most part, these books are function independently. You don't necessarily need to look at the other books in the series. This said, a few creatures within the book do reference others from the book. So I mentioned Necrotech just now. There's some in the 3rd book, but there's some in the 2nd book, and it does just briefly reference the 2nd book, which is almost exclusively in the lore and not in the stat block, but it just feels a bit odd. But then if you buy the books in series, this won't be an issue. So again, I'm just going to be very, very nitpicky. My second option is too much choice. You can have too much of a good thing. In each book, there's over 400 monsters. And whilst players can control how many of these books they buy, when you combine these monsters from the D&D books, you end up with several thousand monsters, which could be overwhelming to new DMs and even experienced DMs. And some parts of the books are just going to remain unused. I realise this is going to be an issue with the other books as well, but with just so much to go through, you may struggle to choose which monsters you want to use and not end up using any. So the final thing I want to talk about in this section is the size of the books. So this is my 3rd hate, but it's not really a hate, it's more just an inconvenience really. So if you look at the monster manual, it's significantly thinner than the Tome of Beasts 2s and still thinner than Tome of Beasts 3s, which has been shrunk down. So if we move those, you can see it is thinner, not massively so, but on the shelf it's going to make a big difference. And especially if you look at Tome of Beasts 2, so I think I have an older copy of Tome of Beasts 2, which is why it's thicker. Whilst I have no objection to the number of monsters in the book, the pages themselves must be thicker than those by the Wizards of the Coast book, because even though they have a similar number of pages, they do take up a lot more space, so the pages must be thicker. Not that this is a bad thing so much in the quality of the book, but just in terms of spacing. So moving on from the 3 things I didn't like, we're going to go to my 3 favourite creatures. So I've broken these down into sort of subsets as opposed to individual creatures, as there's over 1,000 to choose from, and going through all of them would probably take me several weeks. I'll be doing reviews on sort of the subsections as well in the future, such as dragons, golems, devils, and doing a series that, picking my favourite from each category. I'll briefly mention the 3 monsters that have stood out for me. First up, dragons. As you'd expect from a game called Dungeons and Dragons, there are many variations of dragons throughout the rules. Tome of Beasts books are no different, filled with 10 different dragons across the 3 books, including Imperial, Prismatic, and Void dragons. If you like dragons, these offer different uses and abilities to those from the D&D books. I'd recommend checking them out. So far, I've only had the opportunity to use one of these deadly beasts, the Void Dragon, but its appearance has become an unforgettable moment throughout our D&D sessions. You can see the Void Dragon pictured on the front here of the cover. So as you can see in this stunning artwork, you have the Void Dragon. So our unforgettable experience was a player just gained resistance to cold damage. They're fighting the Void Dragon and it dealt them cold damage. The player excitedly called out that they had resistance to me as the DM, only to be told that the Void Dragon ignores cold resistance. I have never been forgiven for this or allowed to forget it. In the end, it was the Bard and the Rogue who killed the dragon. The Bard managed to score a critical hit, and then, being part of the College of Whispers, used psychic blades to deal an obscene amount of damage to the dragon, whilst the Rogue used their sneak attack to hit the creature really hard as well. So next up is Mimics. Mimics are another classic D&D monster, and we all know the traditional treasure-shaped chest, that turns out to be a mimic when you go to open it. Tome of Beasts offers alternatives to these, such as the Torch Mimic, which can also feature as a familiar, or the Dune Mimic, perfect for campaigns set in the desert. Personal favourite of mine is the Cave Mimic, featured in Tome of Beasts 3. So we've all been in that situation where we've been going to open the chest, and it's then turned out to be a mimic. But what if the dungeon you're going into, or the cave you're going into, turns out to be the mimic? Players learn to fear unopened treasure chests, but with this monster you can make them fear the very cave itself. Finally, for my third standout creatures, I'll talk about trolls. Trolls feature throughout fantasy, including Tolkien's Middle-earth and Terry Pratchett's Discworld. Unfortunately for DMs, players have become very familiar with a troll's weakness over time, learning to use acid and or fire damage against them to stop their regeneration. The Tome of Beasts books offer a range of trolls and trollkin, giving you options to manipulate what your players know. Some of these trolls are only weak against one of fire or acid, so you might not be able to stop their regeneration without certain one of those, whilst others, such as the Breakwater Troll, lose their regeneration to different damage types completely. And if you wanted to try and, add this knowledge to your players, you could get them to find a book on trolls somewhere or something similar so that they know to expect something different. So what are my final thoughts on books? I think I've made it fairly obvious that I love these books. I think they are worth picking up, even if you just buy one of them. I'd recommend starting with the first, which makes sense, and then look at picking up the others later on if you decide that you need more monsters. You've got different authors than these normal D&D books, so the monsters feel and play slightly differently, meaning you can always find one suited to your playstyle as a DM. They also give you something your players may be unfamiliar with, so they have to really think about and sort of learn the monsters as opposed to those they may be more familiar with, like the normal mimics, normal trolls, and normal dragons that I've previously mentioned. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, if you like my content, please like, comment, subscribe. This all helps me be seen, helps me become more visible. And if you want to help support me as well, you become a member of Mythical Meeples. I'll put a link in the description below. Or you can support me on Patreon. And again, I'll put a link in the description below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye for now.